together a little reproductive component here to this text. And then I believe 33, we step into the nervous system, and 34, the endocrine system, which kind of goes with a lot of what we're going to talk about in 7 as far as the hormones involved in reproduction. And then we jump out to 36 is our last chapter, and that's my little storytelling chapter that I like so much. So chapter 7, the reproductive process, a long chapter. I'm going to try not to get into the heavy duty stuff today, but Tuesday I will, because when I get started in that, I need enough time to finish it. By the time I get to it today, I could finish it, but I'd really push us to the far limits, and it's really unnecessary for us to do that at this point because we're a little bit ahead. The take-home test going okay?
Yes. Yeah.
We've worked on a few of them, but we didn't crash into all of them right away, correct?
No, we're done.
How many's not even started yet?
We need one.
So my losers need to set up toward the front.
Do you have another one?
Not with me, no. And you'd be with the loser group now because you wasn't here to do it.
I thought they were lying when I asked them. They said take up that.
I brought it in ready to give them right away, and they wanted to take it home, so being the nice guy I am. Chapter 7, if you look here, we're going to see some repetitive stuff on 135. Repetitive in being some of the things they're going to talk about a variety of animals at the beginning of this and the different kinds of reproduction that's out there. Well, it's kind of right opposite of some of the chapters we went through. When we went through the protozoan chapter, we talked about their reproduction, didn't we? We went through the phylum Arthropoda and the different classes of those. We talked about different kinds of reproduction. We talked about bird reproduction. We talked about mammalian reproduction, reptilian reproduction. And they're going to kind of hit all these. But if it's an invertebrate, those lower animals, the worms and those protozoans, what kind of reproduction in general would you say it is? Binary fission. When in doubt, binary fission. So this basically, we're going to sum this up pretty quick in stating the general rules here. So the first thing to do is compare asexual to sexual reproduction. And we've already done that in some chapters. So, in fact, there's a genetic chapter that we even talked about that some. Asexual reproduction is a situation in where an animal in good conditions can reproduce a lot of offspring in a short time frame. But they're all little clones. That's what they are. They're little clones to each other, and there's no diversity in that end result. It's just little clones and a bunch of them. Perfect situation, a lot of offspring, short time frame. Sexual reproduction, there's not a short time frame. There's not a lot of reproduction going on in this short time frame. We're talking about time, energy. It's very energy consuming, very time consuming, but an extremely effective mode of reproduction is sexual reproduction. Doctor?
Are you filming?
I'm on film.
So I probably shouldn't be interrupting you.
It'd be all right.
It'll just be on film.
It'd just be on film.
I'll try to speak.
We could have us a reproductive debate up here if you'd
Yes,
like.
I suppose that we could. I'm glad you added debate to that.
Debate.
I didn't leave a textbook in here yesterday, did I? Biology textbook?
There's not one laying up here.
All right then.
Sorry.
I'll look elsewhere.
Well, I appreciate the help yesterday, though.
You're just more than welcome. Just glad to be a part of it.
Did my work study get the test from you?
She's grading them as we speak.
Very good. Thank you, Doctor.
Call me if you need me.
Y'all will too. We've got to keep something going around here all the time. But needless to say, the end results of sexual reproduction is diversified offspring. The offspring has additional diversity to them because we have a gene pool that's a mix of two parents. Where asexual reproduction is a gene pool straight from one parent. That's not a lot of diversification. But we get a gene pool from two parents and we throw all those genes in there and mix them up. As we talked about in the genetics chapter, you may have siblings, but are they anything like you? There's similarities, but really they may have completely different personalities. You may be the cool, calm, and collective one, and your brother or sister is the hothead that snaps off at anything. Or both of you may sit back and care less about anything, but one's smarter than the other. Or you may just have totally different looks. It's like, well, which one's your daddy? Because your daddy couldn't be my daddy. but yet you have the same daddy. We could prove it genetically. So that's sexual reproduction compared to asexual reproduction. And of course, they mentioned the gametes or the sex cells. We talked about in most animals there is a pair of sex chromosomes, but in reptiles and in turtles, they have no sex chromosomes, if you recall, and that's temperature determines the sex of their offspring. So they finish up that page by, well, the one word that Darren said, binary fission. That's how they finish the page. Moving on up to 136, they mention other forms of asexual reproduction, which are all similar, but yet their own entity, or they would have them all listed under one. You have multiple fission, budding, gemulation, and fragmentation. Depends on the animal, how those work out, but we're gonna be stuck to one, and that's binary fission. That's the one that's gonna work with most across the board. Then we get into sexual reproduction, reproduction with gametes. It includes bisexual or biparental reproduction, the most common form involving two separate individuals. Well, in sexual reproduction, it does involve two separate individuals, a male and a female. Against some modern day beliefs today, two females cannot reproduce, and two males cannot reproduce. It takes a male and a female. And then you have what's called hermaphroditism or parthenogenesis, and parthenogenesis. These are less common forms of sexual reproduction. Hermaphroditism is when an animal has both male and female parts and can reproduce with themselves. We saw this in some invertebrates. There is, to my knowledge today, there is no true hermaphroditism in vertebrates. Now, I say true hermaphroditism. We can document some weird cases, but like in some fish, there are certain species of fish that can be male for half their life, and midlife crisis hits and they turn into a female, and they're female the other half, but they're not both at any given time. So that's a form of hermaphroditism. They call that sequential hermaphroditism. So there's some odd cases, but we saw true hermaphroditism like in some of the worms. Earthworms, for instance, was true hermaphrodites. They had functional male and female parts and could reproduce with themselves if necessary. But you notice that wasn't their true choice. Their true choice was to mate with another worm to get cross-fertilization and diversify the genetics. That was their choice. But they could continue the species without the other worm. Okay? Now, parthenogenesis, this literally means, and this will be a test question it's on your study guide somewhere. Y'all probably, if you have your study guide out, you can follow along quite a bit, and we'll nail some of these down as we go. Then we have very little review at the end when we've already got the answers, right? Parthenogenesis has literal meaning of virgin origin. Virgin origin. So what we have is an offspring from an unfertilized egg. And what you end up, and again, it's not just a full-fledged, perfect example, but one of the examples they'll give you in the text is with bees, like honeybees. A honeybee can choose, the queen bee can choose to fertilize her eggs or not. If she does not fertilize the eggs, she has haploid males. If she does fertilize her eggs, she has diploid females. They're still alive and living. That's pretty amazing to me because the genetic is half for the males than it is for the females. But that they're still alive. Therefore, we had an unfertilized egg because she chose not to fertilize it, go ahead and turn into a live bee. So that, if you think about it, that's a really odd duck situation, but it does happen. So there's parthenogenesis, and we'll look through some examples here as we go. So bisexual reproduction, on 136, individuals sharing parenthood are characteristically of different sexes, male and female. There are exceptions among sexually reproducing organisms. There's a few bacteria. There's some protozoans. Each has its own reproductive system and produces only one kind of germ cell, sperm or ovum, rarely both. Nearly all vertebrates and many invertebrates have separate sexes. Such condition is called dioecious. di meaning two, that should be a dead giveaway that that's referring to two parents, okay? If they only produce one gamete, either egg or sperm, then they require the opposite sex to continue the species. It is a demanding recommendation that both male and female join to continue that species, and instinct's gonna drive that force. Individual animals that have both male and female reproductive organs are called monoecious or hermaphrodites. Like I said, when you get into upper vertebrates especially, and upper would be your reptiles and mammals would be in the upper limits of your vertebrates, there's no known true hermaphrodites. And even in the lower vertebrates, they're the odd sequential hermaphroditic situations. So it's a very odd case. Now, you may hear of hermaphroditic situations in mammals, but they're not true hermaphrodites. They're what's called pseudo-hermaphrodites. And in humans, cases like this do happen quite often, actually, more often than we'd think. But what you'd have is maybe a genetic male that has underdeveloped male genitalia and cannot reproduce, but has the genes of a male, and with this shows some female characteristics because the receptors for the hormone testosterone aren't there. And so the liver converts testosterone into some estrogen, and he may show breast development now. So you have some really weird situations that can happen out there, and vice versa. You can have a female with part testy and part ovary, or you can have a testy on one side and an ovary on the other side. She may externally look like a female, but internally have very few, if any, of the female parts necessary, like no uterus, no fallopian tubes, things like that. And Jamie Lee Curtis is a pseudo-hermaphrodite. I know this is going to shock a lot of y'all, but now, would you consider her have lived a normal life? You didn't know she was a pseudo-hermaphrodite, did you? She's made her millions, quite a good actress. Now she's all about Activia, but whatever it takes to pay the bills. But she's a pseudo-hermaphrodite. She's been married, they've adopted kids. She's been married for eons to the same guy. They've adopted children because she probably told him, I can't have kids. It's good enough for him. So, can they live normal lives? She has. Now, can they live a normal life and reproduce? In a lot of cases, it'd be extremely difficult. So, I guess probably the most sad case would be a situation of hers in which she has, in fact, I think she ended up, don't quote me on this, but in a lot of cases what they'll do is do what we'd call a hysterectomy, but she had part testes and part ovaries, and they just take it out, and she just went with estrogen hormone supplements and maintained the feminine characteristics that she's always had. What if your young child at puberty, what if we figure this out on your child at puberty? And from day one to puberty, we always thought she was a girl. But when puberty hit, some of those female things that's supposed to come at puberty didn't come. We waited another year, still didn't come. So we take her to the doctor, and the doctor finds out that she's a he. Now what do you do? These things people are faced with these decisions. We all pray we don't have to have these decisions, but what do you do?
Let her play basketball for Baylor.
I'll do that and it'll start coming up. Well, let me tell you the first thing you do if you live in eastern Oklahoma. You move. Far, far away. Don't tell anybody anything and move far away. And if they ask, I got a different job. It's none of their beeswax, so to speak. From that point, you get new doctors and you start all over. But the fact remains we still have the same problem, and then at that point you have to make decisions. And she's lived that part of her life as a female. Chances are she probably will want to continue as a female. And I know some of you have these thoughts and theories in your mind that, well, maybe this is what causes people to cross the line. Maybe they're pseudohermaphrodites and don't know it. But y'all are real talkative today, aren't you? I'm going out on a limb here, filming this. And y'all have no suggestions whatsoever? No ideas, no thoughts? Huh? Perhaps and maybe. Well, there's some.
Trying to like soak it in. I'm really kind of surprised about it. It's kind of shocking.
So you're still shocked?
Yeah.
Okay. She may go into complete shock back there. We have to just drag her out here in a minute. They don't hear things like this in McAllister. They ought to go check the prison out there. No? You ever go to the prison rodeo?
They give tours of the prison, like.
That's good.
As a high school, some of those classes. And it's like, they don't
It's
even.
probably for those classes that they say, you're fixing to be in here if you don't
They
straighten
tell
up.
the guys, like, you need to think about it, whether or not you wanna go. They don't even tell the girls, cause the guys get hit on when they go, not the girls.
You wonder what the genetic configuration of these guys in prison are, don't you? You'd think a girl's walking down through there, they'd be
They don't
whistling and
even-
everything else,
No,
but
they don't even look at the girls.
guy comes
The
by and
guys.
he reaches through and pinches his butt, huh? That's pretty bad, isn't it? Well, let's move on, since y'all have nothing else to talk about. It changes a lot, doesn't it? I don't know if it's to the good or to the bad. It changes a lot. Hermaphroditism, down at the bottom, they just talk about it being monoecious. And then they mention the sequential hermaphrodites and the fishes that I already mentioned. So that's there as well. They have a programmed sex change. I guess you could call it the fish's midlife crisis. You wonder what triggers the programmed sex change? Not all of them do it, obviously, or we just flip-flop the whole problem. If we have too many males than females, then you could see a problem where some of the males would actually do sequential hermaphroditism at some point and flip to even out the numbers. You can see that. But if it's just midlife crisis, everybody switches to the other side, and we haven't fixed any problem. So there's a lot of, I guess, speculation that we really don't know a lot about, but we see this happening, and we've documented it happening. Our parthenogenesis, there's the actual literal meaning in parentheses, virgin origin, is development of an embryo from an unfertilized egg, or one in which the male and female nuclei fail to unite following fertilization. So there's your example there. Now, I believe it is on some wasps, many bees, and ants, a few ants. They give a honeybee example that I mentioned a while ago. The inseminated queen bee, she herself's been fertilized. She's sitting there now ready to lay eggs, and she can choose to fertilize her eggs or not. And as she lays them, she can fertilize them or not. Fertilized eggs become diploid females, unfertilized haploid males, like we said earlier. It says this type of sex determination is called haplodiploidy. I think somebody started drinking when they started naming these. Haplodiploidy. Are you happy about that? I don't know. Who knows where some of these come up from? Why do so many animals reproduce sexually rather than asexually? Well, this goes back to some of the main content we said right at the beginning. It's not so much that animals choose to do this, it's an instinctive, innate behavior to reproduce sexually. And to reproduce sexually, there's lots of advantages. The disadvantages are obvious: time, energy, not that many offspring as an end result, but the offspring we get, this is the advantage, is diversified. And they'll tell you in here that it's a high cost of meiosis to go through this process. But in the ultimate end, it is the diversity that adds to the offspring that gives them a greater chance for survival. With that greater chance of survival, the species continues. We just throw a lot of clones out there, and we clone mom or dad, or I don't know what else you'd call them, but they're hermaphroditic, basically, throwing all these little clones out there. And what if the parent is a brick shy of a load? we've got a bunch of clones that are a brick shy of a load, right? If we're producing clones, what's the chance of developing more diversity, continue that species when we continue dropping bricks off the load? French fry short of a Happy Meal. I mean, that's as bad as it gets right there. You know, we continue to enhance with sexual reproduction, and we don't expand any enhancement with asexual reproduction, binary fission. They tell you the ultimate thing here is in times during environmental change, during environmental stress, when the species may feel the pressure, so to speak. This is the times most species will revert to sexual reproduction. And even species that typically would reproduce asexually, we now see them with the capabilities of sexual reproduction, even some of the protozoans. So, to add diversity in times of stress, sexual reproduction. Origins and maturation of germ cells. Well, when we talk about different kinds of cells, we have normal body cells referred to as somatic cells, and then we have the reproductive cells, which are obviously the germ cells. Sex determining region of the Y chromosome is really what kicks in the male. The Y carries this testis determining factor, if you will, and when it turns on, we have a male produced. The male usually develops earlier than a female would. In fact, the female develops as a delayed response, and it's about 8 to 10 days delayed from when the male would produce. In other words, we wait to see if the testis determining factor is turned on. We wait, we wait, we wait, we wait, and finally we say, it must not be here. We're going to be a female. And then it starts developing the female parts. Okay? So they mention on 140, and I quote this out of the book because I don't want you to throw anything at me. In the second paragraph, it says, classic experiments performed in rabbits provide support for the idea that the female is the default sex during development. That's pretty sad, isn't it? But they use the term default, and I think they had a poor choice of terms here, but they use that basically saying, if the testis determining factor is not there and turned on and develop testes and start producing testosterone, then we're going to fall back to producing a female. And there's more females in the world than there is males. So the default can't be too bad. At least we have a good default to fall back on, right? Gonadal sex is chromosomal in mammals, birds, amphibians, most reptiles. Notice it said most because we know it's not in crocodiles, right? And alligators. And probably most fishes. While phenotypic and behavioral sex are determined by secretions of the appropriate hormones. However, some fishes and reptiles lack sex chromosomes altogether, and these groups' gender is determined by non-genetic factors such as temperature or behavior. Now, we've not noted any behavior causes of sex determination, but we sure have noted temperature causes, haven't we, with turtles and crocodiles. And they mention the turtles and crocodiles there, but they don't really go into any of the behavioral. So they're saying they think there's some stuff out there, but they don't have their finger on it yet. So, gametogenesis, production of gametes. That's a general, just production of gametes. What are gametes? Egg and sperm. And then you have spermatogenesis, which is just sperm, and oogenesis, which is just egg. All listed right there. Spermatogenesis usually occurs in the seminiferal tubules of the testes. The Sertoli cells are talked about there. Sertoli cells are a very important support cell. At one time, these used to be called nurse cells because they're actually there as a protective mechanism to protect the developing sperm from the man's immune system. They're actually a foreign body in the system that if his immune system ever saw it, it would seek and destroy it and develop antibodies against sperm from that point on. And let me tell you a case where this happens. A case where a man decides he does not want any more children, and he goes and gets a vasectomy. In vasectomy cases, 70% of men with vasectomies will develop anti-sperm antibodies. Why? What exposes the sperm then that didn't before? Have no idea. They really don't know. But even though we have knowledge and surgical capabilities of making this man fertile again, we can put together the vas deferens again and actually get sperm passing through it. That man still will be infertile because of anti-sperm antibodies that he has developed. It's as good as having the vasectomy. That's what happened. 70%. That's a pretty high percentage. So the Sertoli cells at some point don't function through a vasectomy. I don't know. I don't understand it. I'm not sure they do. But I'm just telling you the stats. They go through development of the sperm. Primary spermatocyte goes through its own development into a secondary spermatocyte. We end up from diploid ending up in a haploid state. So the sperm has 23 chromosomes, then it joins with the egg with 23 chromosomes, and that creates 46 for the man, for the offspring. Oogenesis on 142, same thing here. We do know at the end of meiosis, from our meiosis lecture early semester, in egg production, at the end of egg production, if we have 4 eggs, are they all good? That's a yes or no question. 50-50 shot of getting this one.
No.
Very good answer. What do we have? How many good eggs do we have? Well, since I'm holding up one finger, that's a good guess. How many bad eggs do we have?
3.
Very good. Y'all reading hand signs really well. Those bad eggs are called polar bodies. And so they carry all the genetic information, but they don't carry enough cytoplasm for survival. So the one good egg is big because it has all the cytoplasm. It has a lot of mitochondria for survival after fertilization to produce enough energy to continue growth of that. 143. These are terms that we learned early because we needed to learn them early, and now they're repetitive. See, stuff gets a little easier as we go because we've heard a lot of this stuff. Oviparous means what? What?
Egg birth.
Egg birth. Give me an example of an animal that reproduces oviparously.
Snakes.
Snakes? There's a snake for all of them, so that's a good answer. A chicken?
Most snakes.
Most snakes are right off the study guide. I'm impressed. Chicken, you said? We also used an example of frogs, did we not? So, platypus. Yeah. We can have internal or external, but we're going to produce an egg, right? Yeah. So there's your oviparous. Ovoviviparous.
Egg without
Egg
placenta.
live birth. Y'all read well. Give me an example. There's a shark for this one. Yes, there is. Somebody say snake, because there's a snake for this one too.
Is that what it is?
There are some vipers that fit it, yes.
What?
Ovoviviparous. There's a snake that fits that one too.
Yeah.
And there's a shark that fits them all. There's a snake that fits them all. We also mentioned the little aquarium fish, mollies and guppies. Okay? And then viviparous. What does that mean? Hurry, turn the page, read it. Live birth. Must, now both the last two, must have internal fertilization, but this one must have some form of placental attachment. And it's odd because you have red kangaroos in this, and they're not sure to what extent their placental attachment is. Well, because they're pregnant all the time, it's just like all the time. So there are, I guess, fine lines and little issues with some of their definitions, but in general, that's what we're looking at. Viviparity is confined mostly to lizards, snakes, mammals, most fishes, although viviparous invertebrates and amphibians are known. There are some out there like that, so. Let's see. Obviously, Development of embryos within a mother's body obviously affords protection to that offspring, and it's, here's the instance. You look at a mammal and typically produce one offspring at a time, right? There's a few. It's not uncommon for deer, sheep, goats to produce twins. That's a pretty common thing, but typically we're looking at one offspring. We keep it housed internally, protected for 38 to 40 weeks. That's a lot better chance of survival than holding it in her hand for 38 to 40 weeks, isn't it? Like the red kangaroo, that's why she's pregnant all the time, as a backup plan for death of the first one that she just gave birth to. Big death toll. So we spend our time in gestation, where the red kangaroo spends its time in milk production, specialized milk production. So being housed and then getting it here, and extra extreme care provided by the parents, because it's still naked and helpless, and humans are the worst because at 37 they're still at home. Yeah, they've got a job. Mom and dad's still paying electrical bill. We're saving our money. Drive a Corvette, but we're saving our money. Yeah, we laugh. It's going to happen to us. If I had my way, it won't. We got a big boot. Kick them right in the rear end. All right, moving on to structures of reproductive system. We have primary organs and accessory organs. Primary organs are the gonads. Now, gonad, again, is a general term that covers both testes for the male and ovaries for the female. And of course, they're going to produce egg for the female and sperm for the male. Accessory organs are anything that assists the primary organs in conception. In the male, it's putting the sperm where it needs to be. In the female, it's a place for the sperm to go to connect with the egg and house the offspring. It's anything involved in that process. Now, it talks about some insects in here, have separate sexes, practice internal fertilization and insemination, and consequently have complex reproductive systems. Grasshoppers, they can reproduce. I'm telling you, if you didn't see any this summer, you're blind. Of course, if you had eyelashes like you had last night, you probably saw all kinds of insects. That was a pretty scary deal. Vertebrate reproductive systems. They give a little history here on vertebrate reproductive systems, and I don't test much on this, but a lot of times it's considered a urogenital system. What's that mean? The urinary system has close ties to the reproductive system. Would you agree, especially in males? It's not far away in females, is it? So the combined term, it's used a lot. In male fishes and amphibians, the duct that drains the kidney is considered the Wolffian duct. It also serves as a sperm duct. And then they give an evolutionary perspective there. I'm reading blah, 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 is what I'm reading. But in male reptiles, birds, and mammals, in which the kidney develops its own independent duct, the ureter, to carry away waste, the old mesonephric duct becomes exclusively a sperm duct or a vas deferens. So they're seeing some unique characteristics coming together during development, and usually there's a couple of ducts. Wolffian duct usually turns into the male system, and I think there's a mesonephric duct or metanephric duct that turns into the female system. And in studies in physiology, they did how they know this is simply by castration. If they have a male developing here, and they take out the testes in the male, then the female duct develops and the female parts develop, because we just took away the hormones involved in producing that system. And if we leave it there, then the Wolffian duct turns into the male reproductive system, and that's how we know. So it's a harsh way of discovery, but it's a known way. So in the oviduct or uterine tube is an independent duct that opens into the cloaca in animals having a cloaca. Well, whatever. But another name for oviduct or uterine tube is a fallopian tube. I'm sure you've heard of at least one of those before. What you need to document about this is the site of fertilization. It's always in the fallopian tube, oviduct, uterine tube, whatever you want to call it, but it's always in the upper 1/3 of that. fertilization must occur in the upper 1/3. Now, the male reproductive system, we have paired testes composed of seminiferous tubules. This makes up the bulk of the testes. This is where your sperm are actually made. The Sertoli cells provide protection against the immune system. And we have Leydig cells. Leydig cells is what produces the testosterone. So it's produced right in the testes itself for sperm production. Now, there's enough produced that it gets out in the blood system and it maintains secondary sex characteristics. But we need the bulk of it right there in the testes for sperm production. So the Leydig cells. Sperm, of course, travel from the seminiferous tubules to the vas efferentia, small tubes connected to the coiled epididymis, where finally sperm maturation occurs, then to the vas deferens, and obviously on through the ejaculatory duct. So where is sperm stored and matured? Epididymis is what they're telling you. That's also a study guide question. Epididymis is where sperm is stored and matured. Of course, the vas deferens is nothing more than snipping of one particular duct. One particular duct. It's not, as some men may think, it's not castration. Everything's intact except this one tube that carries the sperm from in to out. It's a bridge there. It must travel. If we do away with the bridge, the sperm don't make it. Okay? In most mammals, 3 sets of accessory glands in the reproductive system. 3 sets is what's there. Seminal vesicles, prostate, and bulbourethral. Those bulbourethral is also known as Cowper's glands. Those are basically lubricative, is about it. The seminal vesicles and prostate adds an enormous amount of fluid to the sperm, and combined we call it semen. And typically there's 3 to 5 milliliters of semen per ejaculation, and in that there would be anywhere from 150 to 300 million sperm. Okay, all hunting down one egg. That's a battle. Now, as far as the female system starts up here, this is kind of where I need to begin when we come back, because what I do at this point is tie this system together up here on the board and showing sperm starting the journey, how tough the journey is, success ratio, which is poor, and reasons why success ratio is poor. And then we talk a little bit about in vitro and artificial insemination and things like that. So this will tie in the end. The hormones at the very end is really what